Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of Welcome back to my holiday-themed book reviews. Now, I know it's only been a week since we last saw one another, but in that week, Carrie and I have been able to get out all of our Christmas decorations. We've been able to finish up our Christmas shopping, and now we're just kind of relaxing with some Christmas movies and TV shows. And when I have a little extra time to myself, I'm revisiting some of my favorite holiday-themed ghost stories. Which, speaking of which, the book that I'm reviewing this weekend, The Woman in Black by Susan Hill, really begins on Christmas Eve, and it is a ghost story, which in my opinion, this book is probably one of the best gothic ghost stories to ever exist. Now, in comparison to the 2012 movie that had Daniel Radcliffe in it, the movie was just okay, but I've read the book quite a few more times than I ever have seen the movie, and with the book, it just goes into so many dark places that the movie tried to touch, but in my opinion, it just didn't succeed. And with the book, there's like this gloom and nihilism from page 1 all the way through the entirety of the book. And it becomes so dark that it kind of makes me feel like I need to read this book with like a glass of absinthe or a clove cigar, or at the very least listen to some Lydia Lunch, you know?
Merry Christmas!
Oh, well, thank you! I know last week, I really didn't enjoy the presents you gave me. You know that. I didn't care for those. I know that's mean for me to say. I know that I shouldn't say it, but you should have known better than to get me that. I mean, it just... But, moving on. Alright, well, I can tell that this is a stack of books, but Pat Robertson! Oh, God! Oh, I feel my flesh rotting! How dare you bring that trash into this house? I hope you didn't pay a single penny for it. What kind of gutter did you find this in? What crack alley did it come from? Oh, God, Carrie, hurry up. Hand me the kerosene and the lighter. It's gotta burn. It has got to be cleansed by fire. Please, spirits, cleanse this house of the Pat Robertson book that was in here. Cleanse me, cleanse me, cleanse me. Even though The Woman in Black was written in the 1980s, it does have an age-old tongue that fits the time in which it takes place, which is the Victorian era. And even though a lot of books in the Victorian era or turn-of-the-century books were really constructed with a language that made the reader feel like they needed a dictionary to be able to comprehend, this is honestly not the case with The Woman in Black, because it is written in a beautifully structured verbiage that even modern-day audiences can comprehend. The Woman in Black by Susan Hill takes place on Christmas Eve and introduces the narrator named Arthur Kip. Now, the majority of this does take place inside of his home on Christmas Eve, where he is sitting around listening to ghost stories that are being told by his stepchildren. And for the most part, he's pretty amused by these stories. That is until one of the stepchildren asks that he relay a story of his own. Now, despite he does have a story to tell, it's so traumatic he wishes not to, so he simply explains that he has nothing to tell, and he gets up and walks out. But once he's alone, he reasons the best way to banish a spirit that continues its hauntings is to exorcise it. And it's with these philosophies that he decides to write about his past once Christmas comes and goes. So he sits down and begins writing about a time when he was a younger man and he lived in London and he was engaged to a lady named Stella and he was an apprentice at a firm that dealt in property leases. Well, while he was working at this firm, the firm owner, which was Mr. Bentley, approaches Arthur and explains that one of their clients by the name of Alice Drablow has passed away, and Arthur is supposed to go to her funeral to show face, and he's also supposed to go to her home so he can go through her legal documents and compile those to bring them back to the firm so they can just see exactly what she had her hands in. Now, he decides that he's going because this is going to be a great opportunity for him to rise up in the firm. And once Arthur arrives in Crith and Gifford, he goes to Alice's funeral, and pretty much the church is empty. It's like just him and his partner who were at the church. And as the service is going on, he gets this eerie feeling behind him. So he turns and sees that there's this woman in black that's sitting a few pews behind him. And she also looks very deathly. So he just kind of figures this is a lady who is simply paying her respects, and he doesn't think too much about it until he decides to inquire who she is, and he turns and sees that she's already gone. Well, he just reasons she left early to get to the cemetery. And once they get to the cemetery, of course, the place is empty and it's just Arthur and his partner, and they are paying their respects. And then Arthur sees the woman in black standing by a tree. And when he tries to get his partner's attention, the woman in black has vanished. Still, Arthur is a skeptic, so he's not thinking too much about this. So his next move is that he goes to Alice's house in Ill Marsh, where there's this causeway that floods at night and cuts whoever is off in that house off from society. And while he's there, he discovers that the woman in black is still pursuing him, and he starts seeing her around the property. But not until it's too late does he realize this woman in black is actually a wrathful spirit who has made him her center focus. Since at the beginning of this novel, one of Arthur's stepsons instigate they tell ghost stories on Christmas Eve because it's an ancient custom, I would like to elaborate on the tradition of ghost stories being told on or around Christmas. To begin, we need to rewind to pagan times and focus on what came after autumn equinox. Once Samhain passed, the days continued to grow shorter and the nights continued to grow colder and longer until the world entered an icy, dead state, where the lands became frigid and barren, which this season alone was enough to set the scene for stories about death and resurrection. But eventually, winter solstice came, which brought the holiday known as Yule. During this time, pagans would celebrate for 12 nights from late December through early January. However, before their merrymaking could begin, the darkest evening of the year would occur. And like Samhain, when the veil between the world of the living and the land of the dead thinned, this wintry eve also allowed spirits to roam, hence the birth of the December ghost story. And while the custom of ghost storytelling on Christmas Eve was carried by the British, it didn't travel with the Puritans to America. Fun facts. Even though the internet provided me with a good deal of information on Susan Hill, I can't do this segment without praising this reference book. Monster, She Wrote is a book that I found about maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and it provides profiles on the female authors who contributed to the horror genre or dark fiction. And for that reason, I turned to this to learn a little bit more about Susan Hill. So if you haven't read this book yet, I highly recommend it if you're looking to get into more female horror authors. Susan Hill published her first book at age 15, which was The Enclosure. But it wouldn't be until later in life that the woman in black emerged from the darkest corners of Hill's mind. Hill said the inspiration for the woman in black came about because she had been reading nothing but ghost stories, and she felt that no one wrote lengthy ghost stories anymore. In past interviews, Hill said setting was her main inspiration for writing this classic, as she had stayed in Suffolk to write throughout the winter months, and the home in which she borrowed for this was surrounded by marshes. Also, for those who were wondering, Hill previously stated that she does in fact believe in ghosts. Now that we have some background information on how Christmas and ghost stories are affiliated, and also we have a little bit of information about Susan Hill, it's time to move on to the spoiler section of this video, which if you've never read this book before, I'm going to discuss some scenes and character development that could ruin the experience for you. So if you would wish to skip this section and move on to the thoughts segment, all you have to do is scroll down to the comments section of this video, and you'll notice that I have a comment pinned at the top of all other comments. Within this, you'll find that I've provided a timestamp where all you have to do is click on that timestamp and it will redirect you away from the spoilers. Now, you only have 17 seconds to do this, so ready, set, go. Overall, this book doesn't have any gross out scenes and it's not scary. But Susan Hill has this way about her writing where she tiptoes around disturbing content, and you wonder exactly when she's going to present something that brings the reader out of his or her comfort zone. Which, of course, this scene does occur, and it's the final scene of the book. And even though I saw this scene coming from a mile away, the act of it going down is still very intense. Now, prior to this moment, you have Arthur, who has learned that the woman who was pursuing him in Crith and Gifford was a ghost, and whoever sees her, a child in town dies. So she kind of stands as like this omen for child death, and also at the same time, she's almost like an angel of death. But while Arthur is there, no child dies. And so he returns to London and everything's gone into the back of his mind. He marries Stella. They eventually have a kid together named Joseph. And a year passes and they're this just great, happy family. That is until one day where they decide to go to the park, and it's a beautiful day. You have where people are picnicking, they're playing, and Arthur and his family are just there in a wholesome setting, just relaxing together and having fun together. And of course, this is where everything goes down. Now, what happens is, at the park, you have a carriage ride that is being pulled by like a donkey or a pony. I believe the one that Arthur's wife and child are in is being pulled by a donkey. So they load up on the cart while Arthur stands to the side, and they're having a good old time, and the donkey pulls off with the cart, and Arthur sees the woman in black emerge from a tree. But before he can stop anything from happening, the woman in black steps out in front of the donkey and spooks it, which causes it to run and crash into a tree. The results of this are where Arthur's wife has now suffered from a broken neck and broken legs, which eventually lead to her death a few months later. And the harder pill to swallow is Joseph has been thrown from the cart where he has collided with a tree and died. And it's just this nihilistic, hopeless moment that is just as intense as the scene in Pet Sematary where Gage is run over by the truck. And that's the end of the book. There's nothing else after that. And we get the idea that maybe, Arthur has achieved closure after writing this all down. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, no. This has damaged him for the rest of his life. Alright, let me break it down for you about Arthur Kidd. Now, he is the kind of character who is damn determined that he is going to hang around the house in Illmarsh despite all of the red flags. But let's get real about it for a second. He was already screwed before he got to the house. I mean, he saw the woman in black's ghost at Alice Drablow's funeral, which, with what this book has to say, he's already screwed. So any meeting with her in the future is irrelevant because that one meeting alone is enough to have cursed whatever's going to happen where a child is going to die because he saw the bitch. Anyway, so we're gonna go on to his time at Ill Marsh, and I'm gonna show you the difference between Arthur and myself. Now, here's the thing. The house in Ill Marsh, it has a causeway that goes to it, where every night a tide comes in and blocks it off, where no one can get to the house and no one can leave the house. So you're in the middle of nowhere. Now, granted, the house actually does kind of look good. It's not in that bad of ill repair, so it's probably a place I would live in if it weren't for that damn tide. Now, the thing is, another ingredient to this that would make me not stay there is Arthur. He is already being pursued by the woman in black. And she even follows him to the house. He sees her there on the first day. Well, the thing is, even after he sees her, that night comes and he tells Keckwick, which is his driver, he's like, oh, well, don't worry about coming to pick me up and stuff every day. Just drop me off and leave me for the next few nights. It'll allow you time to do whatever it is you do. And I'll be here at the house being able to go through papers a lot more efficiently. Hell no. Hell no. You are going to put yourself in a place that you cannot get out of because there is a tide that has surrounded the house. And also, you're going to wish that you had left because there is some hoe in black who be creeping. No. If I were Arthur, my fat gay ass would be taking advantage of that carriage ride to and fro because I guarantee you someone has paid him to take me to and fro. And also, another thing, I would much rather be at the Cricket Arms where I can lay up in bed, get pampered, have breakfast and Netflix and chill. Thank you very much. The Woman in Black brings an age-old subject into play, which is the scornfulness that women go through when they birth out of wedlock. And even though this is an age-old thought, sadly, this is something that still goes on today in some cultures and denominations. And because of this, it really still holds up as a book that contemporary audiences can relate to. Now, with that said, and I'll cover that again a little bit later, the book does have a few themes that come into play. And this is loss, grief, and wrath. Now, as far as loss is concerned, you have almost everyone in the book who has lost someone that they love. Even the irrelevant characters have lost a loved one, such as those who are in Crith and Gifford. They've lost children. You have Arthur's current family, where it states that his wife has children that's prior to him coming into the picture, which these are his stepchildren. And this indicates that his wife and stepchildren have lost a loved one at some point in their life. But they have made peace with that, or at least it seems that they have made peace with the past, and they're able to move on from there and continue as a happy family. Now, this transfers over into the subject of grief, and it also has a comparison between them and what Arthur is going through and what the Woman in Black has gone through. As they have made what appears to be peace, Arthur is still grieving for the past. And also, he kind of has a little post-traumatic stress going on there. But another thing that Arthur and the Woman in Black have in common is not only have they grieved for their lost loved ones, but they have had to grieve in private. And with Arthur, he has the interest of making peace with his past and grief and being able to move forward. But the Woman in Black, she is not interested in making peace whatsoever. She wants to just marinate in the anguish and the rage that has entrapped her, and she wants to inflict that wrath and rage on other individuals. She wants people to hurt as badly as what she has hurt in the past. And so this shows how her version of grief has turned over into a dangerous outcome. And so this brings the final subject into play, which is wrath, which the Lady in Black's wrath is so great, she becomes really an omen, but even more so, she becomes an angel of death. And it's something where she has been scorned so badly, she just wants others to hurt. She wants people to relate with her on a level that is hurt, which is very unhealthy. And the thing is, if you are a grieving person and you have gotten to the point where you want others to hurt the same way that you have hurt, then you need to make peace with that. You need to find some way to come to terms with what has happened and grow from it rather than just remain stagnant in it. Now, with those subjects already discussed, another subject comes into play, which, from a feminist perspective, the woman in black is the ultimate feminist figure. And what I mean by that is, in life, she does not bow to the laws of man, which an example of this is she has sex out of wedlock and has a baby out of wedlock, and she has the intent to raise this child on her own without the help of a man whatsoever. But it's the Victorian zeitgeist that forces her to give that child up. Now, even though she does give the child up, she makes it very clear. Her sister is going to take care of her child, but that child is hers. That child will belong to no one else but the woman in black. And so after this comes to pass, life happens, and I'm not going to spoil what happens here because it will spoil the book. But what happens is, in death, the woman in black is also defiant because she defies the laws of nature, which is, instead of her crossing over to go to either heaven, purgatory, hell, or reincarnate herself, whoever knows what happens in the afterlife. Anyway, instead of her obeying the laws of nature where she leaves this world and goes on to the next, she is actually an individual who defies that by staying on Earth and causing nothing but turmoil for the past 50 some odd years. And so she's really a defiant figure in literature. Now, message-wise, the book really does stress that it is best to make peace with the past because tragedy is going to be inevitable. People need to be prepared that something tragic will happen to you. And it is okay to grieve. It's all right to mourn. But the important thing is you don't stay stuck in that mournful process or that grieving process. And you have to know when to pull yourself out of that. And if you can't, you have to find some means of help, maybe through therapy or something, that can help pull you out of that rut. To begin with, Susan Hill has this amazing way with her writing where she treats her characters, plot, and setting all equally, which means they are all equally strong because she's focusing on everything just enough to make it where the reader feels like they're a part of the plot, and the characters are likable, and they are characters that you really want to see succeed. Now, the thing is, this does not have a happy ending. So if you're the kind of person who has to have a happy ending for your book, this is not going to be for you. And another subject that comes into play is the death of children. So if you're a parent who has suffered from child loss, this book probably will not be for you because it really touches on that subject very strong. And it could trigger if you are a person who is still grieving, or you might have some post-traumatic stress due to that tragedy. With that said, I really did enjoy this book. It is a heavy book to read, but it's not really a thick book, as you can tell, so it doesn't take long to read. But it is very superb with its writing, characters, plot. The sentence structure is easy to comprehend, and it is a great source of escapism for the holiday season. On to the questions. The Woman in Black provides one of the most ruthless villainesses in all of horror. Now, I would like for you to recommend to me what would be another horror book that has a ruthless villainess who is just as equal, if not worse, than The Woman in Black. I'm looking forward to your suggestions here because I love a good female villain, so load up those suggestions in the comments. The second question is, with The Woman in Black, she really feels like this ghostly urban legend for Krith and Gifford. So my question is, what is a ghostly urban legend that you grew up with? Now, as far as myself, I grew up with the story of Hookman, and this is an urban legend that maybe started around the 1950s, 1960s, but it's something that my parents would tell me as a scary story, and then when I was even in elementary school, other kids and I would talk about this kind of sort of boogeyman because their parents had told them. And the whole concept is you had this Civil War soldier who had his hand blown away during the Civil War, and he retreated into what would be our current park, which that park will remain nameless because you're not allowed to go into the park at night anymore. And back in the 1950s, 60s, 70s about, you could go into the park at night. But what would happen is with this man, his hand was blown away. He took refuge inside of what is now the park. And I guess he lived on until he just died of natural causes or something of the sort. But he had really regressed into like this hermit type of life. And so after his death, the rumor was that there was a bridge that was built over where he had lived, and that bridge has long been torn down, so don't even bother looking for it. And if you were to go there and either stand on the bridge or nearby it and scream, "I don't believe in you, Hookman," supposedly his ghost would come chasing you down and he would chase you out of the park. Now, one of the stories I had heard on this, and this is a story that my mom had told me, which was when she was in high school, some of her friends had gone to the park at night, went to Hookman Bridge, which that's what everyone called it, Hookman Bridge, and he ended up standing on the bridge and had yelled out that he did not believe in Hookman. Well, he had left his car parked a little distance away, and he and maybe one or two people who was with him had heard the scraping noise come from where his car was parked. So they ran back to the car, and there was this long scrape down it from front to end, and it was like this brand new paint job he had had done too. And so when that happened, they hauled ass, and that was the end of the story. So I'm kind of thinking that maybe someone else was in the park, and when they heard him scream that, they just thought it would be a great joke to pull that on him. But that's not ever a urban legend that I had tested out. And even if I was stupid enough to go into the park alone at night, I would not do that because the thing is, I'm more so concerned about if I'm going to run into a panther or a bear, which my area, it is known for its panthers and bears, and I'm just not going to risk my life like that. With nothing else left to discuss, it is now time that I thank Joseph Baylott for contributing to my Patreon account. If you would like to contribute as well, the link to this is in the description section of the video. And for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos. If you're unable to contribute, no sweat. I just use this money to maybe get some props or do some advertising with, so it's nothing that's really crucial. And if you are unable to contribute, I'm still going to be making videos. This is all just for fun, so don't worry, it's all good. Now, also in the description section of this video, I'll have links to my Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So if you would like to connect with me on those platforms, your opportunity is there. And before I head out, I would just like to note, please subscribe to this channel and click that notifications bell. There are tons of more book reviews coming up in the future, and I would hate for you to miss out. So until we meet again, I hope you have a great week and sweet nightmares.